So you got your student visa sorted and you're preparing to land here in Australia. Great! This is the ultimate guide for surviving your first 24 hours in Australia as an international student. Are you ready? Let's go. Now, before we get started with the things, it's important to understand that first 24 hours might look different for each international student. But this video will give you some ideas on what are the things you need to be mindful of, what are the things you might need to do in order to prepare yourself for surviving those first 24 hours. And we will talk about what are you going to do in these 24 hours anyways, most likely. So without wasting much time, let's get into the video. Now, the first step would be regarding your arrival at the airport. That's when your first 24 hours basically start. So as you land in Australia, you obviously know you need to go through immigration first, which obviously verifies your student details, student visa, passport, and things like that. And once you clear that, then you go through customs, where you might be asked regarding things that you're bringing into Australia. And as we have mentioned in the previous videos, all the passengers arriving in Australia will need to complete an incoming passenger card just like this one. I suggest you complete this card in the plane itself before landing in Australia, as it will save you time and hassle. In this incoming passenger card, you are required to mention the things you are bringing into Australia, especially those ones they have asked about here in this passenger card. And if you are, then you need to declare that on this card itself. Make sure to complete it correctly, because not providing the correct information could lead to serious consequences like penalties, imprisonment, or even visa cancellations. So make sure to complete it correctly. And if you have something that you need to declare, make sure to tick yes. Based on that, you might be asked for further inspection, or they might let you go without any checking. And Australian government has a really good slogan for this: don't be sorry, just declare it. And if you're unsure about some question, you can leave it blank and then ask the Australian Border Force officer, and they'll be happy to tell you whether you should declare or not. And this whole scene at the airport can take anywhere from 1 to 2 hours or longer, depending upon how many flights are landing. So that's what you would be doing in the first couple of hours here in Australia. Now, once you have exit the customs and into the arrival halls, then the next thing might be to exchange some currency. Of course, if you are bringing some Australian dollars with you, that's great. We usually recommend you to bring some Australian dollars, at least enough for the first 1 or 2 months, so that you can survive. But some people may not have got that opportunity or may not have a chance to exchange it. And you might need these Australian dollars for your transport to your accommodation, or just buying some food or water. So for that, if you need it, there are outlets available in most of the major airports here in Australia where you can exchange your local home currency to Australian dollars. Of course, the rates are usually not the best at these airports, as it is the case with most of the currency exchanges at airport in any part of the world. So if you can avoid exchanging money and you don't need it right away, it is better to go to the city center where you can get better exchange rates. But hey, as I said, if you are in an emergency, you need some dollars, you need to do it, well, you have to do it. And there are outlets available at the airport for doing so. Now, after that, the next step would be the airport transfers, which is going from the airport to your accommodation. Now, if you have a friend or family member who's picking you up, great, as it will save you time, effort, and obviously some money as well. Now, here's an important tip that many international students don't know about, that some universities and colleges also offer free airport pickup as well. It is important that you ask your university or college that if they offer such services, then you need to book it nice and early before landing in Australia. Of course, you can't just rock up and ask them to pick you up. So you will need to usually make a booking for that. And again, if they offer that service, great, you'll save some dollars. If not, then there are usually multiple options available in many international airports here in Australia for your airport transfers to your accommodation. Obviously, the first one is your public transport. Some international airports here in Australia have got direct train lines or even buses, which you can take to reach the city center or your accommodation. Apart from that, you have taxi services which you can hire. You can also use ride sharing services, and you can also use some other providers also, like Skybus here in Melbourne. And these sort of services usually bring you to the city center, from where you can take a train or tram or bus to reach to your destination. Now, in terms of the cost, the public transport usually seems to work out to be the cheapest, but just keep in mind that it may not be the most convenient or fastest option. It might be for some, but usually taxi or ride-sharing services are the fastest option. And I suggest if you can pre-book these airport transfers, that's great as well. Now, airport transfer can take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, again depending upon your location, but it can be longer if you are taking public transport or if your destination is further out. Then the next step is checking into your accommodation. Now, depending upon the type of accommodation you have booked, you will be required to do some sort of a check-in formality, which could be completing some forms, providing some sort of an ID like your passport, and some other details to get your accommodation sorted. And they hand over the keys and give you further information regarding your accommodation. Now, this is specific if you are going to live in a student accommodation like university or other private student accommodation, but it's also similar in other sort of accommodation types such as hotels, hostels, and Airbnbs. Now, the check-in into your accommodation can take anywhere from 15 minutes to half an hour, again depending upon formalities and if they are really busy or not. Now, moving on to the next part, which is settling into your accommodation. So you have finally landed and you've got into your accommodation. Great. Now, most likely you will be unpacking your bags depending upon the type of accommodation you have booked. Now, if you have booked a short-term accommodation, then you may unpack only few of the bags or just the basics. But if it's a long-term accommodation and you have booked it for a few months, then you might like to unpack all of them. It depends upon your personal preferences. But if you're too tired, just take the essentials out that you need it for the day or maybe the next day. Obviously, at this time, you can take some shower, call your family back home, letting them know that you have arrived, which you can also do it at the airport if you can connect to the Wi-Fi over there, and also take some rest as well. Again, depending upon how long your flight was, you might not feel too tired, but Australia is obviously far away from most of the countries. The chances are that you might need to take some rest before start doing something else. Now, if you're living in a shared accommodation, it's also a good idea for you to speak with your housemate, at least meet and greet with them. And if you are hungry, then it might be a good idea for you to order some food from popular takeaway services like Uber Eats or DoorDash. If you want to sign up for Uber Eats, we got an offer given in the description box below. So click the link in there and you might be able to save some dollars when you sign up with that link. Now, once you have rested a little bit, might be a good idea for you to explore your surroundings. And that's the next thing that we suggest you to do in your first 24 hours. So ideally, you should walk around your neighborhood, try to understand the surroundings, check if there are any supermarkets or any convenience stores or grocery stores around the accommodation, or even finding some restaurants or takeaway shops. Also look at what are the nearest public transportation options available for you. Now, this settling in activity can take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, again depending upon how long it will take you to do those activities, and if you want a longer rest or shorter rest, depend upon those factors as well. And might be good for you to actually go out and get a SIM card and set it up as well. Now, these days you can also get eSIM card as well, which you can pretty much activate as soon as you arrive here in Australia. If you need a link for signing up for an eSIM, we'll put that in the description box below. Feel free to check that as well. And last but not the least, have some rest and get ready for the next day. Now, the jet lag thing is real, so it is good idea for you to take good amount of rest and get yourself refreshed for the next day, as there are so many things that needs to be done after arriving in Australia. That includes setting up your bank account, going to university, attending orientation, and many other things. Again, you can take as long as you need for the rest, but according to our first 24 hours, depending upon your situation, it can be up to 12 hours. Now, if you want to know what other things that need to be done after arriving in Australia, I highly recommend you checking this video here, as in this video we give you a lot of details on the things you need to do in the first week after arriving in Australia. So if you want to know more about them, just click the video over there and I'll see you there. All the best with your travels.